grandfather's portrait. Amy hated staying the night at her granny's house. Of course, she loved her granny, but her house was old and uncomfortable. The home had been built by Granny's parents, and because of its age, the foundation shifted and often led to creepy noises in the quiet of night. Pipes would sometimes hiss, and every time the old heater in the attic started up, a terrible thump would ring through the ceiling of Amy's room, giving her a fright. But sadly, there was nothing to be done, as Amy's parents were going out of town for the weekend, meaning she had no choice but to stay overnight at Granny's place. So she tried to make the best of it. After all, despite the nights being spooky, she had a lot of fun spending time with her granny. So, during the day, they played cards, watched some television, and made dinner together. But once the sun went down and bedtime drew near, that familiar sense of unease began to grow in her stomach. Amy tried her best to ignore it as she brushed her teeth and settled in for bed. For a while, all was surprisingly peaceful. Amy found herself just on the verge of sleep when suddenly she shivered awake. For some reason, she was terribly cold. Amy rubbed her eyes and got out of bed, walking to the closet where Granny kept the spare blankets. She grabbed a thick, fuzzy blanket and carried it back to bed. While settling back in, Amy realized something else was bothering her. She felt as though she were being watched. She swallowed hard and looked all around the room. Nothing was out of place, and there certainly wasn't anyone else in there with her. But that's when she noticed something new. Up on the wall, there was a large, circular picture frame. It had beautiful, decorative silver work that twinkled in the dark. That wasn't the part that disturbed her. It was the photo being showcased within. On display in the lovely old frame was a painting of an old man. Though it was cast in the dark shadows of a room, Amy could tell it was extremely well done. The old man seemed very lifelike as he scowled down at her. He had serious eyes, and his wrinkles cut deep into his grumpy face. His eyes glimmered from the sunken sockets in his head, surrounded by dark circles. His skin was pale, and his white hair was just wisps that stood on end. It was a rather frightful picture, if Amy was honest. She had no idea why Granny would keep it in the house. Amy didn't like the idea of sleeping with a painting of the stern old man staring at her. She decided that the best solution was to cover it up. So once again, she got out of bed and grabbed another blanket from the closet. The picture was above her head and too high for her to reach. So Amy tossed the blanket. To her relief, it caught on the silver frame and hid the painting from view. The rest of the night, Amy slept peacefully. The following morning, Amy asked her granny about the painting, but she was very confused. Granny said there was no painting of an old man in Amy's room. This made Amy very nervous. Her eyes darted across the room and landed on some photos that Granny kept on the wall. One in particular caught Amy's eye, so she got up for a closer look. The photo showed an old man, just like the one in the painting in her room, except in the photo he was less pale. He didn't have the dark circles around his eyes, and he looked a great deal less scary. Amy looked back at her granny and asked who was in the picture. Granny smiled and told Amy that it was her father, or Amy's great grandfather. Amy pointed at the photo and told her granny that he was the man in the painting. At this, Granny got a strange look on her face and asked Amy to show her where she saw the painting. So Amy led her granny upstairs and into the room. The blanket still covered the picture frame on the wall where she had left it the night before. Granny looked pale, the corners of her mouth turned down slightly as she reached out her hand and pulled the blanket off the wall. As it fell to the ground, Amy felt a knot form in her stomach. Now that it was daytime, she could properly see what it was. It was not a picture frame that hung on the wall, but an old mirror.